Hello and welcome to Why Do We Teach? I am today's introductionary, whatever, Adenike Arishabaz, and we have Quishelle Brooks, Waylon Nimley, and Jalen Little, and we are your regular hosts for Why Do We Teach? And this week we are talking about four main objectives. For one, we are going to separate formative from summative assessment information. 2, organize the entries in a grade book according to the learning represented. 3, track information about work habits and social skills separately from achievement information. And lastly, record achievement information so you can interpret it accurately. So I hope you're ready for an excellent episode. We do apologize as to why we're not together. There were lots of scheduling conflicts on top of death in families and hospitalizations and etc. There's just a lot going on for us this week. So I hope you guys still enjoy. First up, as always, is Quishelle.
All right, well, thank you for that great introduction for our podcast this week. So I want to start off with Objective 1. And Objective 1 is separate formative from summative assessment information. So formative and summative assessments are separate types of evaluations teachers use to assist their students' learning. Formative is done when the students are actively learning and completing the assessments. Then teachers can give feedback and instruction if needed to help improve the students' learning. It's also used to help keep track of students' progress and see where help is needed and where is there room for improvement. And so, for example, this could be done using pop quizzes, open discussions, or surveys, compared to summative assessment, which are more critical evaluations typically done at the end of the course or the term. And to see what the student is learning using a grade scale based upon a set of standards, and also a summary of achievement and curriculum evaluation. And this is typically done by like final exams or tests or projects and sometimes portfolios. So basically they're similar, but they're not, because one is based off how you do overall long term, and the other one is more so checking in to see where you're at on more of a daily basis. And that is my Objective 1.
Hey, so I'm actually going to be talking with you about how to organize the entries in a grade book according to the learning represented. So what this essentially means, like, we all have a grade book. You have some way that you track the students' records as to how well they're doing in your class. And this is simply just asking you to organize it based off of what you taught for each learning target and how well the students performed. So I imagine some sort of Excel sheet. I remember when I was a kid, I remember seeing actually my teacher's grade book, and it was just like the name and then whatever the quiz was, like if it was quiz 1.2, whatever. But then I remember her having notes as to like what each one was. So, and then you would just see how the students tracked. I feel like this really just helps you, for one. The biggest thing is helping you figure out like where your students did well versus not, because then you can you know where to adjust as necessary, because as we all know, like as the school year continues, it builds upon the things that they should have already learned. So if you see, like, for example, I'm biology, so let's say at the beginning of the semester we're talking about cells and this reproduction and the way that cells reproduce with mitosis, and then later on in the semester we're talking about meiosis. Well, a lot of that like piggybacks off each other. So if I remember that my students didn't really understand prophase, metaphase, etc., but now we're doing meiosis, where now we have 2 sets of those phases on top of some reorganization and still the same splitting of cells, etc. So if I know they were struggling, then I know where I have to go harder in these. And then that even helps because now I don't have to go back to mitosis, or not like go back specifically to review mitosis when it comes to exam time, because we're talking about it later on in the semester. Just to quote the book specifically, I have it written down here. Organizing by learning targets allows teachers to, quote, track student progress by learning target, which is essential to diagnosing and addressing the learning needs. So, yeah, like I said, it's also valuable in discussing the student's strengths and needs with parents during the grading period. So, I love how these chapters are always tying back into the conversation and how to get the parents as well as the students involved in the learning process, because the conversation is really where, is really, I don't want to say where the learning happens, because learning happens throughout the whole progress, but this is like where we take the kids to the next step. This is where we take them to the next level. Like, we all know how to grow our students, and this is how we do it. It's through conversing with them with where they can grow, where they're doing fine, how they can do better, what we notice with them. And this is just one way to help track and guide those conversations, because it's really, really hard to tell a parent, like, oh, your student isn't doing well. Well, what aren't they understanding? And you're just going, well, they failed quiz number 3, 6, 7, and 9. Okay, so what are we going to do about that? But then now you have to figure out, like, oh, what was quiz 3 on? What was quiz 7 on? What was quiz 7? So instead of that, you're just able to be able to assess, oh, well, quiz 3 was on blank, quiz 7 was on blank, quiz 9 was on this. And all three of these ideas are all based on analysis. So I think your student is having a hard time analyzing the information and then building upon that and creating their own thing. So one way what we can move is if you could have a conversation with them. How about let's create flashcards and you try to talk to the student about how to connect the words, because then from there they will be able to build upon those ideas. So yeah, I just really like this. I'm gonna just end on this. Overall, organizing the gradebook entries by learning targets enhances clarity, supports targeted instruction, and ensures that grades accurately reflect the student learning rather than just task completion. Because I feel like we do get lost in the gradebook and just trying to get grades in and making sure that the students' grades aren't looking terrible. I know I am for sure a perpetrator of that. The school that I taught at had a limit of 3 assignments outside of your weekly assessment, so four assignments a week. And a lot throughout this semester I've learned how to kind of form those assignments in ways that benefit both the learner as well as the instructor, because it will show you whether or not you actually taught them well and whether or not they understand it, as well as it allows them to not just be checking off boxes like, okay, I completed it. It's like, oh no, you actually have to sit down and think and figure it out. So that's one thing so far I love about this class, and just this book in general. And I don't think I really have anything else to say. I love how we're just always talking about conversations and trying to dig deeper and bring the best out of our students. I think that is something that as educators we get lost in a lot, because it's just, like I said, so easy to get lost in the grade book, so easy to hurry up, especially if you have a bad set of kids where you're like, you know what, I don't even like this class, I'm just trying to hurry up and get them out, because it happens. I feel like it just is the reality of dealing with large groups of children. You're gonna have a set you don't like, you're gonna have a core you don't like, you're gonna have parents you don't like to mess with, you're gonna have 504s, IEPs, things you have to work on, accommodations, meetings. It's just, when everything gets compiled on, it is so easy to just get, I don't want to say lazy, but just to rely on the grade book and relying on multiple choice, because those are easy. You can look up a Quizlet and submit it and things like that. So I appreciate that, but I really like the idea of organizing my grade book like this, because like I said, just having the conversation, it just eases it all. But yes, that's my objective.
Alright, I'm Jalen, and I had objective number 3, which is track information about work habits and social skills separately from achievement information. So one idea from chapter 9 that I learned was that as teachers, we should keep the academic performance of a student separate from things like their behavior, their effort, or their teamwork. Students' grades should reflect, or as teachers, we should grade students based on what they can do or what they know, not how they act during class or how they are during class. So if they're talkative, super energetic, or need reminders to stay on task. So not like on the report cards where for the comment section. So not that part. We should actually grade them on whether or not they know the skill or not. So The work habits and the social skills are very important, and as teachers, we should be able to track them and report them in different ways so grades can stay fair and accurate. For me, in the PE classroom or PE gym, this is exactly what be during a basketball unit, as we're on basketball unit until the end of the week. I will assess a student's ability to dribble, pass, and shoot, and as their achievement grade on their report card, not whether or not they were able to show sportsmanship, if they got along with their friends or teammates, or not how well they followed the directions. I'll only grade them based off of their skill of basketball dribbling. So their skill would be reflected in their grade in their basketball ability, while their teamwork and behavior grades, which I will not grade, will be noted somewhere else, like on the report card. They'll get the actual grade they have in class for their participation of doing this skill and knowing this skill. And then at the comment section will be their behavior. So that is what I learned from chapter 9 for objective number 3.
Hello, everyone. I am Nimley, and I have objective number 4. This is chapter 9, and I have objective number 4. Reads, record achievement information so you can interpret it accurately. So it's pretty much looking at scores from it in detail, showing growth and progress versus just percentage. Because with like raw score, you can see more so details of the context about students' performance. So recording achievement information accurately is important because it ensures that grades truly reflects what students know and what they can do. The chapter talks about the importance in using raw scores instead of percentage or grades, because raw scores kind of, like I said earlier, give more details and context about the student performance. Couple of things that I want to highlight when it comes down to objective number 4 is that as a teacher, recording achievement accurately helps to show what students truly know, and then using raw score give a clearer picture than just percentage or grades. It helps, at me being a teacher, it helps me see growth and identify what student needs to improve on. And it also makes grading more fair and meaningful when you are not just focusing on scores, like number scores and stuff. Overall, I try to like focus more so on tracking learning than just giving scores. I'm a health and PE teacher, so it's a lot more meaningful if I'm focusing on the learning aspect of it. Have to learn the skills to do or to play a certain sports that I want them to play. That completes my part for objective number 4. Thank you.
For my reflection, I was supposed to talk about which idea I found the most convincing or the one that I was more willing to use. And for me, it was objective number 3, which was to track information about work habits and the social skills separately from achievement information. I feel like that is something that I never thought about, but I just innately did it just because just to be fair to the student. For example, my first year ever teaching was the year after COVID. So it was the 21-22 school year. A lot of these students haven't really been inside of a classroom building since the 4th grade. And so now they're in 6th grade. So when they're in a brand new environment, it's middle school. Ooh, what's gonna happen? Is the tension real? Am I gonna worry about fights? And like, like the natural fear that 6th graders have. But then on top of that, it was like some of the students, if any of their family members got COVID, then they would be out for a little while. If they got sick, they would be out for a while. Or Sometimes it was just fear. Sometimes the parents weren't really ready for the kids to go back to school. So some kids actually were here like the first couple of weeks and weren't there for a couple of weeks and then came back. So it was a lot of adapting and making sure that all work was on the computers, and then having to also figure out how to make sure the lessons were interactive enough and they got to see my face enough and record things. And it was a lot. It was a lot. But something that I innately did was like, if it was a student that, like, for example, that was an ESL learning, so English Spanish learning, so mainly spoke Spanish at home, only spoke English at school. If they didn't do well on the quizzes and things like that, I wouldn't necessarily hold that against them. I would find some way to curve it. Or if they did bad on the test, I would make sure that I helped them with the homework so that it didn't reflect so poorly on their grades. Just things like that. Because the real thing here is about how the work habits and social skills like affect it. So another thing was like, if a student was getting bullied, I had one student that was sadly being called out her name because of things that she did that was inappropriate. Let's say that. So she felt really bad because, you know, she was doing things that she thought was right between her and her little boyfriend. But the rest of the school did not feel it that way. So she was being called out her name, and she was already somebody that had an IEP. So for her to be getting bullied, and then on top of that, also, you know, just naturally just struggling in school because she just was not the best learner, or let's say that she didn't know how to best learn, because she was not stupid or anything like that. Like, I shouldn't say she was stupid, but she was somebody that had the capability. She just had to be pushed the right way as well as given the right tools, and she was fly. But yeah, so if she wasn't doing too well, I would make sure that I assisted her or do things. So like in general, just making sure that on top of the lesson planning, but also making sure that I did my part in making sure that she was able to get everything that she needed to make sure that her grade actually properly showed her effort, properly showed what she really learned, and things of that nature. So work habits and social skills, I never even thought about that. But I really liked how this text says, attendance, cooperation, class participation, academic honesty, and attitude all contribute to learning. Something that, again, I feel like we just innately know, but I know I never thought about that when it came to actually developing my grade book and actually having things to present, because there was plenty of students I gave F's to. Not because I didn't like them per se, but I also know they didn't try. But I never thought about some of the social aspects behind it. Maybe some of the things that they were going on at home. I know I had a couple students that had more stuff going on at home that would lead them to not have it. Some of them didn't have Wi-Fi. Some of them as soon as they got home, they were second parent, things of that nature. So things that, you know, you have to take into consideration on top of, like I said, class participation. If you have a student that, like I said, ESL learner, if you have a student that's not able to really speak up in class and they can't ask the questions that they might have, they might listen to you and understand what you're saying, especially as you talk about it with the visuals or you're explaining it, you know, they might understand it. But if they have a question, they might not know how to say it to you. So now they're sitting all stuck, and it's not that they don't understand the work, but it's like the question that you asked them on the test is the exact question that they had for you. So now they don't perform as well. So this is something that we need to take into consideration as well. So I just like that specific objective was really trying to make the educator look at the student with a whole picture. It's not just numbers anymore. Like, it is like, well, no, yes, numbers, but yes, how did you teach? Did you hit the learning targets? Did you give the right instruction? Everything. Okay, we checked all those boxes. Now let's look at the student. What might have affected their grades to the point of why they might have not performed so well? Is that something we need to take into consideration when it comes to time to pass them on through? You know what I mean? So I just really like the idea of, you know, after you check off, like I just said, after you check off all your boxes, what does the student look like? Give us the whole picture. Do they deserve to move on? Something that I remember my school having to do when we had to start writing our letters for retention. Some students, I was just like, no, he deserves, like, his grades are poor, but he is he is honestly doing his best. He is honestly doing that. Some of them was like, no, his grades are poor because he doesn't care and he thinks that nobody cares. So we should hold him back. But yeah, I just like that.
I have reflection number 2, which talks about how things in chapter 9 aligns with my beliefs. So this chapter mostly aligns with my beliefs because I do think it is important for grades to actually be fair and accurate and be based off what students know and has learned, not just how they behave. Like, I do believe that they should be separate or separated, behavioral things and grades. Sometimes I know that teachers can mix the effort and behavior into grades, which confuses the parents and the students on the report cards, and doesn't really show what the student understands or knows. It just tells that the student is behaving in class, how the student is behaving in class, and I can see how that gets confusing. I do agree that participation and attitude and behavior does matter in class, and that they should be explained to parents, and they should be told to parents how students are acting, but I do believe that they also should be separate. Parents should know how the child is doing in class besides their behavior, and how their behavior are besides the grades. So I do agree with that. But I don't think participation in students' attitudes should lower or raise a student's grades based on those things. But I do think at the same time their effort should count more in grades rather than their behavior. So this also challenges me to rethink some things and how I grade. But I do try to stick to having, on the report card, having the comment section for behavioral and then the grade section for their skills. So that's what I do recognize.
Hello, my name is Jasuli Nimley, and this is chapter 9. For the podcast, I have reflection question number 3. Which strategy or ideas from this chapter would you feel most confident implementing, and why? For me, it would be more so as a teacher learning to separate attendance and behavior from true learning academic scores. And the reason why I say that, because I work at a Title I school, and there are so many times I will see extremely gifted students that have horrible behavior and horrible attendance. And can you imagine implementing and putting all of those three together to say, oh, this is where they are? That would be unfair, because I just feel like they all different separate entities. Your academic scores is like what you know, and then, behavior is behavior. And I just feel like it's not fair to the students, because behavior can come from so many things. It could be an environment thing. It could be health reason. They have some ADHD or something like that can impact their behavior grade or attendance grade, and not necessarily the academic grades. But combining those three things can really be, for me, I look at it as being unfair. So to answer the question, that's the idea I would take, is to, as a teacher in my classroom, to separate those three things when it comes down to looking at if my student really learning what they are learning, or looking at their scores and separating their behavior from it. That completes my my answer for reflection question number 3. Thank you.
So yes, I have a reflection number 4. And reflection number 4 question is pretty much asking for what part of the chapter makes you feel uncertain, nervous, or hesitant about applying in practice. And I will say, after this chapter, one thing I will say I would be a little hesitant about is the state base grade reports and the summative assessments. And the reason for that is sometimes state tests, in my opinion, don't really represent the student's level of learning or their development over time. Sometimes students could be a bad test taker, and they could be nervous while completing the exam, and sometimes, not be completely focused on the assignment. And this is just speaking from my experience as well. I wasn't a good test taker. I just knew personally by myself, I just like I said, I wasn't a good test taker. So therefore, sometimes what I learned throughout the year didn't really reflect in one test. And personally, I just feel like there should be another method to use to evaluate what a student has learned over time for that school year, rather than using a standardized test at the end of the term. But that is my, hesitant about this week's chapter.
Hey, so just in conclusion, I wanted to go over what we really should have taken out of this chapter. So just based off the 4 objectives and everything that we have talked about today, I feel like this chapter can be boiled down to how to grade effectively, how to organize and grade effectively. Because with objective 1, where we talk about how to separate the formative from the summative assessment information, this is so that we can see, I'm like, okay, what is the information that we got from the students telling us just what they understand, and then okay, they're supposed to understand this stuff, how well did they perform? Separating that stuff can, for one, show us where we might have lost our students before the summative, as well as where we need to build compared to just the summative, because the summative is a collection of an entire target compared to the formative, where it is breaking down the different pieces. So organizing that in your grade book would be crucial for when it's time to go back and figure out where we need to build, where we need to build, where we are fine, where you might have your high flyers if you want to create like breakout groups and have certain like student leaders within the groups, or even do group projects and things of that nature. Like breaking that up just gives you a bigger, like I feel like that's just theme, a bigger picture of the entire of this your class, let's just say that. And then with objective 2, where we talk about the organizing the entries in the grade book according to the learning represented, that right there is just, again, just further organizing it, like even almost just like the formative and the summative, except this time you're actually saying like, okay, formatively, what were the different learning targets that they were supposed to have, but what were the different learning targets that they were supposed to know, and did they understand them? And then when it got time for the summative, did they still understand them? So again, just organizing your grade book so that you can go back and grow with your students. And then the 3rd learning objective being to track the information about work habits and social skills separately from the achievement information. I already talked on that. I just think that is, I feel like that's just really important for when it's time to talk about the individual student, because like I said, sometimes bullying is a fact, sometimes grandma dies, sometimes it's just a rough day, sometimes it's a snow week, and a bunch of kids are just at home not learning all that much. It's always something, or something could always happen. And if you have that written down and you can be able to track that with certain learning targets, or where a student might have not performed well, now you start to get the whole picture on the student itself, on the student themselves, which is very, very important. And then lastly, to record the achievement information so that you can interpret it accurately. This is, sorry, I have it written down and I'm just trying to find, oh, right. This is when we're talking about the, like, so you understand how well the student even performed. So the book gave these 2 examples where 2 out of 3 correct answers versus the 12 out of 18. So even though both of those show a 67, you might just write 67 in the grade book, so you're just like, oh, they only understood like some of the information. But if you write 12 out of 18, it's just like, oh, I gave you 18 questions and you answered 12 of them correctly. That tells me that you know, yeah, that's only 67% of the information, but that also shows that you have a wider understanding of the information compared to when you just see 67. Because if it is just 3 questions, well, even if it's 3 questions, 2 out of 3, but like, let's say it's 9 questions and you get the same 67, it's like 6 out of 9. It's just like, well, those last 3 could have been like your really, really hard questions, or those could be your throwaway questions. You know what I mean? So I feel like when you have more details as to what the assessment was outside of just like what it actually covers, it gives, again, a bigger picture as to what was actually understood. So that's why I say I feel like this chapter was really just boiling everything down to how to organize your grade book and really get the most out of it, how to get the bigger picture from it, because it could just be a bunch of numbers if you wanted to, but it can be a really powerful tool for understanding the student, having the conversations with the student, growing as a teacher. Because now, even like, let's say the school year ends and now you're like going back like, oh, that was a good school year, and now you have to do it all again next year, right? If you can go back in your grade book and see, okay, well, with this lesson for this formative assessment, all of my students across all my blocks didn't do well. I need to revise that lesson because clearly it just did not work. And oh yeah, because I remember I had to go back and redo it. So it's a tool not only for your students and for your classroom, it is a tool for you to grow better as a person, or not just as a person, but also as an educator. Because you can take this outside of the classroom. You know what I mean? If you give yourself a grade book just in life, or just to organize like your checklist for yourself, like, okay, like let's say you had a goal to lose 50 pounds and you were doing the diets and everything, and but you're tracking it all down. If you see like, oh, well, in week 1, you know what? I only lost 2 pounds that week. I didn't lose my goal of 4 pounds or whatever. But you know what? I followed my diet though. Oh, but on this day, I skipped the gym. That is why I did that. So you see, so I feel like this is also something that can be applied elsewhere. So it is one of those things that's just, it's just awesome. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Again, apologies on the separate videos. There's a lot was going on for us all this week, but we'll hopefully be back together next week. Toodaloo. Have a good one. Bye-bye.